happen with the way our equipment is set up is if somebody activated the main parachute and the AAD activated the reserve parachute. Okay? Because if you had pulled the handle to activate your reserve parachute, you would have cut away the main parachute, so it can't still be there. But if you were activating the main parachute at a fairly low altitude, and your AAD detected that and went off, and your reserve deployed, then you're going to still be attached to the main parachute, and your AAD or your reserve is going to be up there as well. And so long as they're not tangled up with each other, they're just going to fly along and sort of bump into each other like that, and everything's normal.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Okay, so the question is, what do? Do you steer one, or do you try to steer both, or do you try to cut away one and steer the other one, or whatever? So the answer is that generally you're better off to not cut away the main parachute and to steer just one parachute. And if they're lined up as they are here, where one's sort of right in front of the other, you're best off to steer the front one. The problem with cutting away the main parachute is that it could then, after it's been released, it could then wrap around or catch on your reserve parachute because they're so close together. And the problem with trying to steer both parachutes is that you might cause them to diverge from each other possibly, and once they diverge from each other, then they start to angle further and further downwards, and they end up eventually being in a different configuration from this. Then they end up being more like this. You can't actually see both of them at the same time on the screen because they've flown apart so far from each other. Okay? Note the horizon. Okay? So what's happened is the parachutes have flown apart, they've angled more and more downwards, and eventually they got to here. Okay? So up above you is a lot of open sky, but no parachutes. And off to the side, or out in front and behind you, are parachutes that are angled in such a way as to be flying straight down. So you find yourself descending real fast under two fully open parachutes. But you're not really under them, you're between them. Can you sort of picture that? Yeah. So that's what might happen if you end up trying to steer both parachutes. They can do this on their own, potentially as well. So if you ever find yourself where you've got two parachutes widely separated from each other, the best thing for you to do is cut away the main parachute. How would you do that? Same with the one you already pulled there. And when you pull it, you're going to disconnect from that main parachute. You're going to swing under the reserve parachute. Okay? Does that make sense? But if they're close together, you should stay with them and just steer one parachute, the front one, if they're front to back.
Is there any way of even cutting the reserve parachute, or
not?
You can never cut.
Not without a knife.
Without a knife.
Yeah.
No.
There's no photo. Go imagine something like this. Just trying to tuck and roll. Go to the onion pod. Make sure you're 10 all
Okay, now these parachutes are close together, but they are side by side rather than being front to back. So you should still steer just one parachute. Don't be trying to steer both. And when you're landing, your rate of descent is a little slower than normally it would be under one parachute. So it's not going to be a hard landing. But if you tried landing with two parachutes that are widely separated like this, it's going to be an extraordinarily hard landing, which you might not get up from. Okay? So that's why you should cut away from that situation. really too concerned about these things happening on your first jump, because realistically on your first jump, someone's activating your parachute for you, your main parachute. We're not gonna do it at 1,500 feet, you know, so we're really only concerned about you getting into these situations once you get to the stage where you are solo, on your own, activating your own main parachute. And, you know, we'll talk again before you get to that stage. Okay? Whereas the other things we looked at involving tangled steering lines or twisted lines, collapsed end cells, big rips in the parachute, you know, all those things we talked about earlier, those are things that could happen on any jump, including your first jump. So, any questions about any of them?
If the line is just twisted and